In episode 4, Dorothy invites Leanne to do a little bar upstairs in the attic. But when Leanne looks out the window, the group of teenagers is growing. She gets a little freaked out, closes the shade, and then goes to work on her core. As they're doing it, Leanne makes mention of the fact she's terrible at dancing, and Dorothy asks, "Why would you say that?" And Leanne tells her, "It's what my mother used to tell me. Whenever I had to learn choreography for a pageant, she wouldn't let me eat dinner until I got it perfect. And I'd try to do my best, but eventually I'd get so tired and hungry that I couldn't get it right." Dorothy feels really bad for Leanne, but she gets called away by Sean because a safety guy has come to their house to assess just how safe their house would be for a toddler. And the answer is not very safe. As they're looking at the kitchen, Leanne comes in and tells them, "You're not going to need any of this. As long as I'm here, nothing will happen to Jericho." Dorothy turns to Leanne to talk to her about the whole situation, but Leanne doesn't even let her get a word out and says, "You need to feed him. He's hungry." The two women go in the living room, and Leanne tells Dorothy, "I don't like that guy." And Dorothy's getting annoyed with the fact that Leanne doesn't really seem to like anybody. She tells Leanne, "He's not one of your creepy cult people. He's owned this company for years." But Dorothy's a little bit distracted because Isabel, her main rival at work, is doing a story for a place that she used to do all the time. Dorothy feels like she's kind of getting pushed out by the news channel. Because of the stress of it, Dorothy ends up lashing out at Leanne. A little while later, Dorothy comes downstairs in probably the scariest thing the show has ever had you watch. I mean, this outfit is horrifically bad. She finds Leanne sitting on the stoop outside, and she says, "We still friends?" And Leanne doesn't respond, but her body language tells you, "Yeah, Dorothy, we're still friends." But then Dorothy gets up and gets in an Uber, because she's headed into work to demand more stories, better stories. So for the time being, it's just her and Sean with Jericho at home. But as soon as the car pulls away, the one teen who was interviewed by Dorothy, who had the heart problem, starts walking up to Leanne outside saying, "I just want to talk to you." And Leanne gets super freaked out and says, "Stay away from me." She really fumbles to get inside, but she is able to. Leanne goes upstairs, grabs Jericho. When she comes back downstairs, the house has yet another new visitor. Her name's Sylvia, Toby's girlfriend, who also works in the food industry and is at the house looking for a job with Sean. Right off the bat, Leanne does not like her. And honestly, neither does Sean. He's kind of annoyed about the fact that Toby brought this girl here looking for a job. He tells Leanne, Toby knows better than this. Leanne then asks Sean what he's got going on, and he says a pain-in-the-ass catering job. But then he realizes he could use some help, but he doesn't want Sylvia, he wants Leanne. Leanne is all for it. Sean figures, Dorothy can just watch Jericho for the time being. But that's not going to work. Later that night, when Sean goes upstairs to tell Dorothy about the fact that Leanne will be helping him out, Dorothy tells him, no, she won't. She'll be watching Jericho. Because I went into work, I demanded a story, and they gave me one. So I'm not going to be here tomorrow. The next day, Dorothy's the one who actually tells Leanne about the fact that she's not going to be working with Sean. Leanne then asks her, when will you be home? And Dorothy says, late. The segment's going to be live, but there's B-roll that we have to get for a party. This really annoys Leanne. She tells Dorothy, it's not good for Jericho when you're out late. Dorothy explains to her, I know you didn't grow up in a house with women who worked, but that's not practical. I love my job. It makes me really happy. Because of that, it makes me a better mother. And if God forbid anything happened to Sean, I could support the household. But Leanne says, I would never let anything happen to Sean. Dorothy starts talking to Leanne about her own goals, about getting her college degree, forging her own path. But Leanne, who is visibly annoyed, turns to Dorothy and says, all I care about is this family. Dorothy doesn't really know what to say and heads off to work. When Leanne does go downstairs, she sees who replaced her. It's Sylvia. And Sylvia has a bad attitude. She thinks she's a little Gordon Ramsay, and she is really bossing around Toby, which annoys Leanne. When Sean sends Toby out to the park to feed the kids, Leanne confronts Sylvia about it, asking her, why are you so rude to Toby? But Sylvia is so thrown off by the question, she doesn't answer it. She just keeps going back to work. And she's actually doing a really good job. She's impressing Sean. But Leanne doesn't stay in the kitchen because Sean asks her to go help the safety guy set up his equipment. And the safety guy is doing that, or at least having his men do it, while he hits on Leanne. It's super uncomfortable. She actually runs upstairs to her room. She was wearing workout clothes that Dorothy gave her, and she didn't really feel comfortable in it, so she grabs some of her clothes. And she starts looking at the wall that Aunt Josephine is hidden behind, which coincidentally has more cracks now than it did before, and she starts screaming at the wall, I guess this is my fault, right? Because I'm dressed like a whore? When she's able to compose herself, she gets dressed up in more Leanne clothing and heads back downstairs, where Sylvia continues to berate Toby. It gets to the point where when Toby goes outside, Leanne confronts him about the fact that he's letting Sylvia just walk all over him. But Toby just chalks it up to, that's how chefs talk. Leanne is really trying to get Toby's attention and screams at him, she doesn't even like you. I mean, all you want to do is live a normal life, and people just assume that you're always going to be there for them as they treat you like crap. That's not fair. Leanne, though, gets called back in the house by Sean because Dorothy's on the phone. Leanne gives Dorothy a quick update and then has her turn on the television to record her segment. The segment is with a graffiti artist, but as Dorothy is interviewing him, Leanne is giving her a death stare on the television. Then, during the interview, Dorothy gets distracted from it and then starts lactating. It's on live TV, so the whole thing is caught. Leanne, though, doesn't care. Jericho is back in the kitchen and crying. She goes to grab him where Sylvia yells at her for leaving a crying child where they're supposed to be working. And then suddenly, the shit just hits the fan. You've got the stressed out environment of a kitchen. The safety guy is trying to wrap up, which Sean has Leanne sign for. And Sylvia is yelling at Toby for spilled ceviche. It's so much sensory overload that Leanne actually leaves the room and sits down outside in the hallway. But back in that kitchen, as Sylvia is ripping Toby, saying how no one should ever hire him because he's an idiot, she ends up slipping on that ceviche and falling. But her ring gets caught on the hook that was being used to make saltwater taffy, and it ends up ripping her finger clean off. Toby immediately tends to Sylvia, but Sean starts yelling, where the hell is her finger? Find her finger. And her finger got knocked into the drain. As Toby's frantically looking for the finger, he ends up turning on the garbage disposal. And when blood ends up shooting back into his face, he realizes pretty quickly where the finger is. The only thing left from that finger is the mangled ring which caused the injury. Sean ends up somehow getting it all together, cleaning everything up, and later that night, as he's trying to just decompress, Julian comes over and says, you gotta see this. And he shows Sean what happened to Dorothy in this interview. At that moment, Dorothy comes walking back in the house, and she looks like someone who knows her career is probably over. She starts bawling her eyes out, and Leanne walks up to her and gives her a giant hug. Once they put Jericho down, Dorothy starts talking to Sean about the whole situation. She explains that when Jericho was gone, she just thought, if I can only have my baby back, I'll never ask for anything. But something just isn't right. It's like the universe is trying to hurt me. I can't explain it. She starts questioning what's wrong with her, and Sean just consoles her. As that conversation is going on upstairs in their attic, Leanne has put on a record, put that mangled ring on her finger, and starts dancing her ass off. And she was lying. She's great at dancing. But as she's dancing her heart out, the group of 3 kids that are standing outside of her window has grown to 9 kids. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought this sucked. Make sure to be nice in the comment section. If you don't see the next video up in the end screen there, I'll get it up in a few days, not to worry. And I have merchandise, so go buy a mug or something. It's never too early to think about Christmas gifts, folks. Once again, thank you for checking out this recap.